Today is June 6th in the year of your Lord, 2018. You're tuned in live to Q4 Radio, AM 1680. Tune in at iTunes Radio, and of course, www.QUE4.org. Good morning to all my listeners. Thank you for tuning in live. Can I hear myself? Can y'all hear me? Is it all good? I'm think everything is in order this morning. If I could just put on my socks and get situated, we can get on with the Bro Diallo Show this morning. I don't give out the number enough. This is a live show, and you can call in if you are so inclined with your questions, criticisms, contradictions, praise, whatever you have, whatever the Lord puts on your heart this morning. I swear, man, they say pimping ain't easy, but I mean, I think I'd make a wonderful, wonderful preacher. I think I'd be just so good at it. Because you know, what I've observed, being raised in the church, being baptized at Covenant Missionary Baptist Church, that is now Covenant Memorial Baptist Church, founded by my family members, but swindled away from us. That's how church is some dirty business. Some dirty business. I don't know if you're not in the church like that. Churches, you know, they have rhetoric about ministers being called to the Lord, and this nonsense about where a few are gathered in my name, I am above thee, and every man unto himself is a fellowship, and blah, blah, blah. You know, and I think as much as black people love them some Jesus, they don't really study Protestantism very much. And they really don't understand the divergence between Protestantism and Catholicism and all. But that's a bit much. I don't even want to get into that. That's a story for. But what I'm saying is, what I've observed growing up in the church is that the less a pastor believed, the more successful he or she was. Meaning that the biggest BSers were the most successful. Now I know of preachers in my own family. I've got everything from the hustle Cadillac preachers to the old Southern slave plantation preacher. I don't want nothing more than to praise the Lord, who weren't really in it for profit and self-aggrandizement, but they truly believe that nonsense. And others who, I don't know if they believe that nonsense either, but they saw the potential for personal enrichment, and you can't knock the hustle. So, but the ones I saw, because even my wife also has some ministers, but her family is so much less religious than mine. I like to remind her of that from time to time, about how much more godly my family is, because her family tends to be more educated and affluent than mine. But I'm like, my family's walk with the Lord is better than yours, so whatever. So you can either be a family of delusional believers or a family of upper class Negroes, whatever. But all I'm saying is, in growing up in the church, and you know, church is a syndicate also. A lot of these churches and ministers, guest pastors, traveling ministers, it's a whole network. It really is the pork chop industrial complex. You know, the delusion industrial complex. I don't know of a good name for it, but what I found, my main point is that the least a minister, a pastor, a prophet, a prophetess, the least they adhered to the tenets of the Bible, the more successful they were, is making a living off of hustling the Bible. And I mean, these dudes would a blatant disregard for the fundamental tenets of Christianity, of piety, of a meekness, of being meek and humble before the Lord, of helping thy fellow man and living humbly. I mean, these dudes would flaunt their ill-gotten gains, new Cadillac every year, on the date that the new brand came out, fancy suits, big diamond nugget rings, flossed out wives, flossed out mistresses, and it just seems like the followers just couldn't get enough of it. They could not get enough. It's like they wanted to have the flyest pastor. It's like these congregations wanted to have the flyest pastor. And you have other pastors who say, I'm not going to take a wage. I mean, to preach the Lord's word is enriching enough. So they didn't take, I know some pastors that didn't take income from the church, who didn't count the money, who weren't in the room when the tithes were collected and distributed. If they had a church fund, then a church got built. You know what I'm saying? If they had a food drive, then food was distributed. Wasn't nothing, wasn't no shenanigans, didn't have no mistresses, no side children like Reverend Jesse Jackson. They didn't make deals with local politicians. They didn't hurt they shunned politics. They didn't engage in politics from the pulpit. They didn't sell their congregation to the highest political bidder. They didn't advocate for any products. They didn't do any product placement or product endorsement from the pulpit. And they were always had the worst cars, the tattered suits, the ricketiest churches, unless of course, and even when they fixed up the churches, they were hesitant to put too much money on it because that's just, you want to glorify the Lord, and you put too much money into material things, and it don't mean nothing. It all is for nothing. So I think I'd make a good preacher because I don't believe it. I don't believe any of it. So I can get up there and say the biggest nonsense, and I can collect money in the name of the Lord and put it towards revolutionary efforts. I can collect money, tithes, and then give that money over to secular, even atheistic organizations to do political and economic empowerment and Pan-African work. And I would sleep so comfortably at night. Now, I'm not going to be no Creflo Dollar. I'm not going to be into private jets because that's not my thing. Revolution is my thing. So I would embezzle the church funds for revolution instead of, I wouldn't have a Rolls Royce or a Bentley. I'd still, I'd have a nice bike. And I've been wanting one of those little mounts for my bike where you can put your phone on there. So I have this app where it tells me that where I'm going, I can map out my bike route and the safest route, and it tells me how many calories I burned and the distance that I rode and all that. And there's one of these little, so I can mount my bike, my smartphone onto my bike. Now, so if I became a corrupt preacher, I'd definitely get one of those. But everything else would go to the revolution. And I think I would be very successful because I could get up and just say anything. The Lord put it on my heart today. I was thinking, I was in misery, I was in doubt, I was questioning myself, and a light appeared before me, and the Lord touched upon my heart, and the message that I bring to you will be coming directly from the divine Most High. So you're not listening to me right now. You are listening to the spirit that has inhabited my body to descend upon your souls. I could say that. It's utter nonsense. And I think an honest preacher would have to get up and listen, this is just coming from me. I don't have no magical powers, no voice on high. I just, this provides me comfort, and I hope it brings you some comfort too. Go listen to a pork chop, a hustler preacher versus an old, poor, broke iron plantation preacher. Their messages are different, even though they're supposed to read from the same book and have one monolithic source of inspiration for their word. They all say, prosperity ministry. I could, it's a good backup because y'all sure ain't representing like y'all supposed to for the Bro Diallo Show. I'm just saying, I got a backup. And y'all could play this even when I became that corrupt preacher. Y'all could play this. Y'all could be like, hey, y'all could walk in the middle of my sermon on Easter Sunday and be like, listen, y'all up here listening to Bro Diallo and that cheap purple pinstripe suit and them Annihilator Gators, and he didn't put a conch in his hair, and he didn't grease a pack of hot dogs on the back of his neck, sitting up there, he didn't got on the swine, and I grow some jowls, and I could be up there like Big Boss Nass, Jar Jar Binks King. I could be up there preaching, and y'all could walk in there and be like, stop all of this. Diallo conspired to do this, to build this mega church, to swindle you people. He's admitted that this is what he's going to do. And you could play this recording. You could play this recording right here for them. And you could play back me saying that you could play me back saying this. In front of my whole congregation. Freudian. I'm getting Freudian on you. In front of my whole congregation. And they would still throw you out of the church. They would say you were doing the work of the devil, that you were inspired by demons, and that the Lord, just like the white conservatives, the white evangelicals say about Trump, we know about all of Trump's dirt. And the more dirt he do, the more we know that he's doing the Lord's work, because the Lord can take the most wretched being to do his divine work. And then you can turn around to those same white conservatives and say, well, why did you say Obama was the Antichrist? If the Lord could take an evil man to do his works, then how come you didn't apply that same logic to Obama? And they would still throw you out. That's more double talk. Because belief, faith, makes you immune to facts. That's the whole point of creating faith. So if the more evidence and facts you come with for believers, the more hostility they show you. They don't believe, they don't live in what came to be called a fact-based world, an evidence-based world. They live in a faith-based world, a belief-based world. And they are immune to anything you can say. That's why you got instances where preachers are pedophiles, they molest the children, and then they become registered sex offenders, and then at their new church, the congregation votes to retain the pastor, they vote to retain the minister, and ban children from the church. So if you get up in the morning, you get yourself on, you put on them silky sheer socks that holy men like to wear, you spray on your Afro sheen, your wife puts on your wig and those big ridiculous hats and that pastel colored nonsense and her fur shawl, and then you get your kids ready in that itchy, tacky, rayon, polysynthetic fabrics suits y'all put little children in on Sunday morning, and y'all go out and get into 2 different cars. I don't know how the children even get to church, because you go to church with the pedophile preacher and then send your children off to the church where the preacher ain't been caught doing that dirt yet. I don't know. And people, that works because they are believers. They're faith-based. Not only that, you could have even prominent, world-renowned ministers like Al Sharpton, who was caught, Reverend Al Sharpton, who was caught years ago embezzling National Action Network funds. Now, his National Action Network, I've actually been to the headquarters, or in this shoddy little, raggedy little, stanky, downtown Brooklyn, stanky, funky little offices for the National App. That's Al Sharpton. Y'all don't know. Al Sharpton has a fully fledged civil rights organization. Just like Dr. King was backed by, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was backed by Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Malcolm X had the Nation. Messy Jesse has Rainbow Push. Al Sharpton has the National Action Network. You know, when he show up, y'all think it's just him. No, he brings with him a whole movement. And then he had these old black women mostly, working in these offices diligently for the civil rights and human dignity of black people around the United States. But he was embezzling money instead of upgrading the offices, getting up. They still on some old, IBM, books, them old hard, thick keyboards, and them green screen and them little old school printers. No central air, but he had a mistress that he kept, believe it or not, in Trump Tower. So he was using National Action Network funds to pay his quote-unquote secretary, who never made her way down to funky downtown Brooklyn, who was in a midtown Manhattan high-rise, a Trump Tower. Trump Tower. And let me tell y'all something about Trump Tower in New York. I don't know if you know anything about New York real estate, but it's easier to adopt a child than to secure housing in New York. It's easier to get a new kidney to get a new set of lungs or a new heart transplant than it is to get in on a freaking real estate, to get into a co-op or a condo. I've seen people affluent. I know personally wealthy black folks, credit scores of 800 plus, who ain't never been late on a payment, have graduated from the best schools, and are high-ranking members of the highest establishments, whether government bureaucrat or multinational corporations. And they wanted to buy a condo and had enough cash on hand to buy that condo 10 times over. And they had to go sit before the condo board and give a sample of their blood, give their entire genetic lineage. It's crazy. But Trump Tower was known throughout the 80s, 90s, and even up till now, was known as a place where you didn't have to deal with all that. You didn't have to have to sit through all that nonsense. Credit app, getting board approval. Trump Tower was like cash on hand, stacks on stacks on stacks. So in Trump Tower in New York were a lot of like mafioso bosses, Russian mafia, hustlers, shysters, and shucksters. Because you could buy a condo there. They don't worry about your credit rating. It's all cash in, cash out. Because Donald Trump is a long-time criminal. Is a consistent criminal. And so you could walk through the door, and if you got the cash. So the fact that Al Sharpton there's plenty of luxurious residences all over Manhattan. And now you can leave Manhattan. You can go to Queens. You can go to Brooklyn now with the gentrification. It used to be if you wanted to live lavish, you had to live on the island, south of 125th Street. Not Harlem, but anything Midtown and below, you could live lavish. Now, so I'm talking about back in the 90s when he got busted doing this. So even Al Sharpton was, because, he's embezzling church funds, he's misappropriating funds, so he had to go to Trump Tower. So anybody that's like, now people aren't so keen on bragging about it nowadays. It used to be people that lived in Trump Tower. Even here there's a Trump Tower here, not too far from me. I could probably look out the window over here and see Trump Tower. People would side-eye you. People that knew, like, you live in Trump Tower, I know you got bank, but you're doing something dirty. You sneaking. Something you doing ain't together. But anyway, a lot of ministers had residences in various Trump Towers. But like, and I don't want to get into Trump's corruption because I'm living in Trump. I don't want to it surrounds me. We're inhaling Trump's corruption and exhaling. We're absorbing Trump's corruption into our pores. He's no longer a dirty, corrupt criminal, embezzling, defrauding, Russian oligarch financed New York. He used to be New York's problem, and New Jersey, Atlantic City's problem. He used to be their problem. Now he's the world's problem. Thanks, white people. I mean, I wish white people had the capacity for collective shame. I wish black people could share that. I mean, because it's doing them bad. I used to think collective shame was the worst thing, but I don't want to get off this point. I'm belaboring this point. I apologize, but sometimes I indulge myself because it's Friday. Friday night, just got paid. Anyway, I digress. Or regress, progress. Allow me to proceed. Al Sharpton did some serious dirt, and he's still beloved by his followers and congregation. Jesse Jackson was called child out of wedlock, same old hustle, ain't nothing, same old thing, and he's still beloved. Farrakhan can take out Malcolm X, take out Khalid Muhammad, literally, figuratively, take it how you want, depending on how much you know about the story. Hook up with Reverend Sun Young Moon in the Unification Church, hobnob and rub elbows with Arab oligarchs, Saudi royalists. Can be a Scientologist. It doesn't matter what he do. And his followers become more aggressive in their worship and adherence and following. So you think you could record this and be like, Diallo plans about everything else falls apart for him. He plans to start a mega church to finance the revolution, and he even confessed to this on the air, live on Q4 Radio. And it won't matter. Now remember this, when next time you got some believer in your face wanting to debate you, some believer in your face wanting to share the light of Christ with you, don't bother trying to argue back unless you just got extra time and in for some amusement. Because they are immune to facts. They are immune to evidence. So the facts you give them about their preacher, the facts you give them about their dogma or their holy books, the facts you give them about anything don't matter. And in fact, and this is not just me making fun of hoopah and hollerers. And then, like I said, it doesn't matter what they believe. You can believe Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior. You can believe that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet. You can believe in that Hindu stuff and the multiple gods of Hindu. Hell, I hate to say it, but it's true. You can believe in Obatala and the Orisha. You can believe in Mayat, Amun Ra. Anybody that is entrenched and oriented and belief-based is immune to facts and evidence. One thing, the only way to get through them is through material reality. Meaning that I could believe all I want, that God will feed me. But if you got the food, if you got the resources, then you can move them. You can't sway their beliefs, but you can influence, if not directly control their behavior. That's why you have a lot of Christians that would like the Lord and believe in God, but they work for ungodly multinational corporations. Now, that doesn't shake their beliefs. So you can go to church on Sunday and pray to a God and then go to work on Monday and work for a devil. And there's no contradiction there because you can be controlled through material. It's like a dog treat. It doesn't matter what the dog believes. You got that little peanut butter cookie treat. That's what my dog likes, these peanut butter cookie things. He's going to do what you need him to do regardless of what he believes. And so the elites really love that. The elites really love having faithful and religious subjects. Faithful and religious peasants, serfs, slaves, subjects, employees, wage earners, wage slaves, whatever you want to call the modern day slaves, modern day subordinates, modern day peasants. There's a lot of names, but the situation remains the same. Your labor is exploited by somebody who does no labor, who does very little labor, or their labor is exploiting your labor and profiting from your labor. That's their work. They want believers. They want, even if you work for a high-tech scientific company that invests in super colliders and space travel and everything that is ungodly, they know that if I got a religious person, they're very unlikely to question what I do. And even if they question what's going on here, they won't do it from a critical standpoint. You know, and it's so easy. That's why religions, at first, because there used to be a time, believe it or not, where it was commonplace for rulers to persecute believers. In the earliest empires, you know, the Romans, what you know in your Bible, it talks about the persecution of Christians, but it wasn't just Christians. Any believer was considered foolish. In magic, you believe in magic and supernatural, and then and pretty much what would happen is that whatever your ruler believed, that's what you had to believe. So if your ruler believed in leprechauns, then you had to believe in leprechauns. If your ruler believed it was a Christian, Constantine, there was one time a ruler like Constantine would start off when he became, because a lot of these rulers would take the throne at 14, 15, 12. You know how your beliefs change and evolve over time. So your ruler starts off, he's a pagan. He's having orgies, and so everybody gets to have orgy. And then he becomes religious in his old age, so everybody got to start being religious. So it used to be your religion was not really dictated by dogma. Your religion was dictated by the whims of your ruler. But then as societies became more complex and empires spread, they was like, that's kind of inconsistent. And a lot of times we would go places and you have different levels of ruler. You would have the emperor, but then you would have these prelates or these little governors, these little noblemen, these little sub-rulers, prince and principalities. And they would all have different beliefs. So the real imperialists figured out, yo, we need to get a uniform. That's King James was like, he went and said, listen, he went to these monks. And King James was like, give me a coherent, consistent dogma. Because there's all these different versions of Christianity. All these different schools of thought. And you've got some people reading from scrolls, and you got some people who can't read, so they just say, everything I say is divine coming from the Lord. You have some people reading tea leaves and looking at patterns in cow dung. You had all these people who claim to believe the same thing, but they've got too many divergent sources of what they believe. So he said, give me a Bible that will enhance my capacity to rule all these people under Christendom. So that's how you got the King James Version edited. A lot of books were thrown out, a lot of books were added in, and a lot of words were changed and flipped and smacked, flipped, and rubbed down. So it's really hard, being that the vast 90% of my people are caught up in this mess. You know, Africa, the continent of Africa, is pretty much split between Islam and Christianity, with some smattering of African traditionalist beliefs. In the United States, the vast majority are Christians, and the few people who, quote unquote, escape the mental death of Christianity fall right into the mental death of Islam. And the few who duck or escape the mental death of Islam fall into the mental death of spirituality, which is more like the original religion. You just make it up as you go along. There's no written dogma. There was no King James or no Muhammad and a bunch of fanatical people with sabers to cut your tongue out and cut your head off to consolidate the belief system. There's been no spiritualist reformation like there was a Protestant reformation. There's been no spiritualist jihad like there was Islamic jihad to lock in. So it's more like the hodgepodge. You know, you can do anything from burn sage to stick crystals into your orifices. It is all this. Everybody's spiritual, but it's really no cohesion there. It's really nothing you can do to lock people in. But again, it's really hard to organize people or to have people act rationally. If people can believe that there's a God or a supernatural power, then people can believe that money controls the world. People can believe that Jeff Bezos, who sits in an air-conditioned office, has earned $1 billion sitting on his behind tapping away at a computer while looking at these people who deliver the package, who manufactures the goods, who do all the grunt work, don't even deserve a living wage. So if you can believe in God, you can get a believer to believe anything. But if somebody's fact-based, it's harder to pull stuff over on facts. Because a fact-based person is always thinking one central thing. What? What the hell? What for? Why? How? When? Facts-based people question everything. That's why we come off as negative. You know, you sit in the church, what the hell are you talking about? You sit in a corporate boardroom, what the hell are you talking about? You sit in a classroom, what the hell are you talking about? You know, you go to a political rally, what the hell are you talking about? You sit across from your wife or husband or boyfriend, lover, what the hell are you talking about? That's why, you know, we seem like we're not the best people. You know, it's easy to be like, well, I believe I know one. If I don't know nothing else, I know this one thing. I believe this one thing. And that belief, being a faith-based or a belief-based person, is a seed that fertilizes all other nonsense and delusions for you to accept. That's why Malcolm X, I said this before, but it bears repeating. Malcolm X ran around this country for a decade saying the white man is the devil. America must fall. The fall of America. The white man is the devil. He said, you put your hands on me, send them to the graveyard. He even said, kill that dog. He said, they down there sicking dogs on our people. If a dog comes at you, kill that dog. And you know how white folks are about their dogs. You better off saying kill cops than kill dogs in white America. Kill that dog. He told the protesters, kill the dog. He said, they spit on you, break their jaw. They come with a rifle, you come with a bomb. See, we were and by any means necessary. He went all over the country, from Oakland, California to Harlem, New York City, and all points in between, saying some of the most radical stuff. But as long as he was Reverend Malcolm X, cult member, Malcolm X believer, Malcolm X faith-based, long as he was saying, kill that dog, but he was also talking about Yaqub and motherships and all kind of nonsense and Allah's wrath upon America, Allah's judgment of America, they were like, let him run. Let the boy run. We keep an eye on him now, but let him run. But the moment Malcolm X said, leave your religion at home. The moment Malcolm X said, I'm working with anybody, I don't forget this belief stuff. He said, leave your religion at home. Which means Malcolm X went from a religious leader to a secular leader. Malcolm X was promoting secularism, non-sectarianism. Say, look, Christian, black Jew, black non-believer, black whatever the hell you are, black, race first. He was echoing both Garvey and Du Bois. He was fusing the black industrialism, black self-sufficiency with black academia, black dignity. He was fusing these ideologies that they weren't able to mesh in their own time. Then they were like, he stopped with the white devil rhetoric. He even stopped with the armed kill that dog rhetoric. He was like, listen, this is a political, economic, and international struggle. We ain't going to be asking Allah or Jesus for a damn thing. We are going to coordinate our efforts and proceed rationally. They were like, we got to kill this fool. Thankfully, we've got some people from his own race, from his own camp, that will create the environment that can lead to his death, because this brother got to go. CIA, FBI, NSA, J. Edgar Hoover. That's when he became a threat, when he became rational. I would have definitely appreciated Nation of Islam, Malcolm X, but I would have never joined with Nation of Islam. I would have been the first charter member of the OAAU because it was second. And that's why whenever you think a black leader, it's going to be a reverend minister type cat. Because they know, well, no matter how angry, no matter how militant, no matter how well armed, no matter what, as long as they're believing, they're not a real threat. You can say white devil all you want, as long as you are not saying rational enemy. And if you look at the black leaders who had to struggle in obscurity, who never got on the national platform, who never got a Nobel Peace Prize, or who are never on CNN, they're mostly the rational leaders. Even back then, we had rational leaders. We had secular leadership. We had scientific leadership. And they were always more aggressively subverted. Secular leaders, Fred Hampton, secular leadership was always deemed more of a threat than faith-based leadership, even though faith-based leaders always had a bigger following, always had a larger platform. I don't think religious believers in the black liberation struggle, and I'm not saying you can't have religious delusions. You can believe whatever you want. But if your belief informs your organizing, I think you're unworthy of leadership. I don't want to be on the front line of the struggle. And it ain't even got to be something dramatic, like taking up arms in an armed conflict with colonizers. It could be something as simple as we're trying to organize a cooperative economics. We're trying to deal with, sustain a community farm or communal agriculture. I don't want somebody sitting across from me when we need to do working and planning and secure resources talking about the Lord to make a way somehow when here beneath the cross I bow. And I'm like, brother, we got this work to do. You gonna be here tomorrow? Inshallah. Nah, brother, no, you. I'm asking you. I ain't asking no other entities, no supernatural forces. Are you gonna do what you need to do on this material round to get here tomorrow? Inshallah. Man, And I work with religious believers, but if your religion is your impetus, is your foundation, is what brings you into this, I have to side eye you. There's a reason. Even Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, when Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was dreaming, I have a dream, he was relatively safe. And Dr. Clark, when he started sitting down with Nkrumah, when he started saying, well, fine, I want people to change their hearts. I want people to, I have a dream, but I also have a textbook here on economics, macro and microeconomics. I also have instead of the Bible, I'm going to start to look at these actual history books. I'm going to study labor history. I'm going to look at the European hierarchical and monarchical structure. I'm going to take a more academic approach to this thing. And forget about sitting on the counter next to white folks. Give us our money. Poor People's March. International. And when he said the Vietnam War and U.S. imperialism, it ain't just about some racist cop not treating black folks properly. It's about a racist military going across the globe, raping the planet's resources. They were like, oh, time to kill this dude. He was no longer faith-based. He still had faith. You can still believe Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior. You can still believe Allah, there is no God but Allah, and his Muhammad is his prophet. You can still believe sticking crystals in your orifices will align your chakra and increase your vibrational frequency to the universe. You can still believe any of that. But if that's the foundation for your organization, for your politics, for your understanding of the material world, if you are what they call fundamentalists, you cannot be a fully whole functional person. And listen, I'm going to tell you this, at risk of being shunned, at risk of being hated, at risk of being attacked. Like to hear it go. A lot of people ain't going to tell you. A lot of people ain't going to be honest with you, because a lot of people want to be able to get that money. Ain't ish funny. Ain't no way you can take this from me. A lot of people know that to validate your delusions means that they can more effectively extract resources, loyalty from you, and maintain status over you. But I'm going to tell you this at, again, the risk of organizing in obscurity. And a lot of people tell me, a lot of brothers I organize with, come and tell me, man, just get off that God stuff, man. Leave that God stuff alone, man. Just good work, man. People, you don't attack people's spirituality. All this talking, we need to work. But the problem is, if we don't get this consciousness, if we don't wake the hell up, we could all get Jay-Z money. We could all get Oprah money. We could all get free. We can go to the United States legal system and have them construct whatever legal reforms, constitutional amendments they want to give us our freedom. You can go to the trenches, get you a Kalashnikov, and carry out an armed revolution and secure your freedom that way. They did it. Zimbabwe, Namibia, the Congo, in Haiti. But if we don't purge colonial mindsets, if we don't develop rational mindsets, all the constitutional amendments or AK-47 guerrilla war victories in the world will not fully liberate us. Mugabe is a beloved black militant who ain't got no business with no white man. He ain't got no business for white folks, white culture, gay folks. He's the most militant black man we ever spit out of Africa, but he's still loyal to the Roman Catholic Church. And that's why Zimbabwe never completed, never went to its full proper conclusion for the Zimbabwean liberation struggle. The most successful thing that the Zimbabwean revolution did was change the name from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe. Everything else was much less effective. I hate to say this, I want African revolutions to succeed, but I'm not going to delude myself and call, because I want success, I'm going to call success where there is no true success. That's just not how I get down. So again, at the risk of being unpopular, at the risk of being shunned by 90% of my black people, even though I'm trying to construct a mass organization, I will continue to let you know your beliefs are utter nonsense. I'm not saying that you don't have a right to believe them, not saying that you have to abandon them, but you need to put those suckers up in the closet. You need to put them in somewhere in your brain. Have a belief box. And when it's time to do work on behalf of the people, when it's time to organize in the streets, when it's time to construct plans for liberation, the agendas for empowerment, you put your beliefs in that belief box and rationally engage in this work. Then when you at home or on Sunday morning or Friday mornings, when you want to sing prayers in alien languages, when you want to pray to alien gods, when you want to read stupid books, go for it. Hoop and holler. If you want to burn your sage and get out your crystals, when you want to put more coconuts and cowrie shells on your shrine, knock yourself out. I'd be the last person to run up in your mosque, run up in your church, run up on your shrine, and interfere with it. But don't bring that mess to the rational arena. And the rational arena should not interfere with your belief arena. And humans have that capacity. And the computer for this image, hold on. Get better. Let me get a better image. Fortunately, humans have that capacity. We have that capacity to have beliefs, to have our thoughts. We don't operate off of instinct. Like a dog's gonna be a dog. And there ain't no way to separate it. A dog's gonna be hungry. If a dog is hungry, a dog is fully fed, it's a hungry dog or full. But we, because of our cognitive abilities, because of our evolutionary asset or evolutionary detriment, we have the capacity to be more than what we are. We're more than just primates. We have the capacity to say, I believe in God, but I'm not going to act consistently with that belief. I'm going to carry out acts that sometimes contradict that belief. Like with animals, there are no contradictions. A dog doesn't contradict itself. A gorilla doesn't contradict itself. But man can contradict itself. You can say, the Lord is my Savior, I shall not want. And at the same time, you say, the Lord is my Savior, I shall not want. You can act to save your damn self. Now, if you already have a Savior, why are you trying to save yourself? You can say, the Lord provides all that I need, and then you get your ass up and go to work every day. You can say, Jesus, take the wheel, but your ass keep both hands on the damn wheel. You had that, and now I don't really trust that. I know there's a lot of potential for disruption. But hey, I got to start where I am and work with what I got, and I organize in a population of people that are steeped in belief. And I encourage my community to shun belief. But until they do, I'll work with believers. But we're going to do it Malcolm's way. We're going to put that in the closet. And if you bring it out, if you whip your genitals out and put them on the table, then you open in a public arena, you open your genitals for criticism. Like, nice, or not so nice. So it's the same thing. If you take something that's deep within you and personal to you and plop it on the table, then you open it up for critique. So whether it's your genitals or your belief system, if I'm at a meeting and somebody says, let's open with a prayer, I'm going to be like, pray to who? And to what end? And what evidence do you have? But if you don't bring up prayer, I won't question you. But anyway, let's move on. All I'm saying is, I say all that to say is, I think I'd make a really good preacher because, and prove me wrong. T.D. Jakes, I don't think he believes a word coming out of his own damn mouth. Same thing for Creflo Dollar. Same thing for the Minister Farrakhan. I don't think any of these successful ministers believe a word they say. Because if they really believed in what they were teaching, they wouldn't be in a position to profit from what they're teaching, because what they're teaching is against profit, is against interest, is against the accumulation of wealth. There's no religion that promotes that. And so that's why the followers are all so subservient, submissive, and their leaders are so cozy with the oppressors. But moving on. Where was I? What my notes have here? I do indulge myself sometimes, and I do apologize. But I am a devangelist. I do try to subvert, shape, weaken, undermine black people's beliefs in everything. And if you must have a delusion, make it an African delusion. Worship an African God. There are millions of gods on this planet. And Africa got some of the best religious dogmas and delusions out there. I don't know why you're taking these shoddy Arab and European gods. All right, yesterday was Algerian independence. And I don't know if you follow me on social media, but if you do, I like to celebrate independence of African nations. And generally what I do is, you know, I'll post something on my blog or Facebook page or Tumblr, whatever, on social media, Instagram, highlighting, and I want to celebrate with other people. Nigerian Independence Day, South African, Zimbabwe, Ghana, Central African Republic, Sierra Leone, which recent, you know, you go back to my show for Sierra Leonean independence, and I played the Sierra Leonean national anthem. I played the Sierra Leonean music and popular artists and traditional music. Wonderful. But you also notice that certain African nations, I don't commemorate their Independence Day because I don't accept that they're fully independent. Like Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia. Are you noticing a pattern here? And Algeria. And the reason why is because I conclude it is my impression that these nations are not only not liberated, they are under colonial occupation. I view Arabs in North Africa as colonial occupiers. The Western Sahara, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, and Sudan, and now Sudan is two countries. So Northern Sudan, I consider those nations to still be under, not neo-colonialism, like all of the rest of the African nations. They're not fully liberated, but they have what Dr. John Henry Clark would call flag independence, or neo-colonial issues, which is an issue. And I don't know about measuring. It's kind of like, are the Democrats worse than the Democrats are not the same as Republicans, and I wish we stopped being intellectually lazy as far as politics goes. The Democrats are not the same as Republicans. Cancer is not the same as diabetes. That is not a testament to saying that cancer is better than diabetes. You know, you have some acute problems that take you out quick, and then you have chronic diseases that'll take you out over a longer period of time, but both of them are debilitating and have shortened your lifespan unnecessarily. But I don't think by dismissing these situations. So anyway, I'm not going to play this whole, is neocolonialism better or worse than traditional colonialism? But it's different. It's not the same. Just like Democrats and Republicans are not the same, but I don't advocate for them. That's like saying the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks. They're both communists, but they're not the same. Democrats and Republicans are not the same. Neocolonialism and colonialism is not the same. Now, we can debate which is better, which is worse. Which one we can mount a more effective struggle against. Black people, we have to struggle. Don't matter if it's a Clinton in office, Obama in office, or a Trump or a Bush in office. Black people, the struggle continues. But we can't do the exact identical type of struggle under one versus the other. Or else we're just interested in struggle, and we're not interested in winning. We just want a perpetual struggle. That way you can just do the same thing no matter who's in office or what their new agenda or tactics are. But I feel that Algeria, which has a grand history, one of my favorite movies is The Battle of Algiers. One of my favorite scholars was a prominent figure in the Algerian independence movement, Frantz Fanon. But one thing I also know is that Africans, black people in Algeria, suffered discrimination on their mother continent. Algeria, Libya, Tunisia, Western Sahara, Morocco, and even affiliated nations such as Senegal, Mauritania, Mali, Sudan engage in not only racial discrimination against black Africans by Arabs and Arabized Africans, they even hold our people in chattel slavery. One of the best books ever written on modern day slavery in Africa was written by the late journalist Sam Cotton, called, Terror. I can't recall the name of the book. Silent Terror. That's it. It's been some time. I have to revisit that book. I hope that book comes up in our new book club. So I cannot bring myself to celebrate the independence of an African nation that is not wholly independent. And some people say, well, the Arabs have been there for thousands of years. They've been there since, the 7th century. And they're too entrenched. They have fused African culture. It's like Dr. John Henry Clark even had to admit Senegal is more Islamic than Saudi Arabia. He said Senegal is a more Islamic state. All the way, couldn't get further from Saudi Arabia. You could, and if you could, you should. But he said that Senegal is more of an Islamic nation. He's been there. He wasn't speaking from just research, but his personal experience. He said the African Senegalese is more a Muslim, more faithful Muslim. And he said, we out-pope the Pope and we out-Muhammad. The one thing you'll find about Senegal, Arab slave masters will bring their chattel enslaved Africans into a place like Senegal. And there are Arab-owned stores, Arab-owned markets, Arab-owned industries that have enslaved Africans working on sovereign African nations. So when it comes to the independence of so-called North Africa, of Arab-occupied, Islamic-occupied Africa, I can't fully say that they're liberated. So yes, the Algerians kicked out the French. But that's as makes as much sense for an African to celebrate as the Americans kicking out the colonists kicking out the British. The Spanish colonizers kicking out the Spaniards. The Brazilian colonizers kicking out the Portuguese. It doesn't matter. It's like if the leopard, if the cheetah runs out the lion and takes over the territory of the lion, why the hell should the antelope celebrate that? And this is something I think we gloss over far too much, because a lot of black people think that Islam is a viable alternative, a less racist alternative, a blacker alternative for black people than Christianity. But I don't know. You look at the open air slave markets in Libya. This is nothing new. This has been going on. Islam, Europeans, Arabs in North Africa have been trading in African flesh before Europeans turned it into a globalized business. It was regional, it was transcontinental, and the Europeans came and made it global. Europeans perfected it. Dr. Clark said that the Arabs' slave trade was cultural, and the European slave trade was industrial. And you think Arabs have as many anti-black racial slurs as Europeans have. So if you want to celebrate Algeria, like I said, there's a lot of good coming out of Algeria to inform black people and our struggles. Like I said, if not for Algeria, I don't think we would have had Frantz Fanon, the revolutionary. Frantz Fanon was revolutionized in Algeria. Frantz Fanon was an Uncle Tom. Frantz Fanon was a fully colonized African. He was awakened by the struggle in Algeria. And there were a lot of refined tactics for mass mobilization, guerrilla warfare, subversion that came out of Algeria that other sub-Saharan African nations picked up. So it's a complex history. It's not, like most things, it's seldom good or evil, black and white. But one thing I know, that Algeria is a thoroughly anti-black nation, ultimately. That's where I have to fall on. Despite the good things that I glean, the benefits that Africa and Africans gain from the Algerian society and culture, I know that a black man, citizen of Algeria, is treated unfairly, is a second-class citizen on his own mother continent. That Arabs, just like Europeans in South Africa, reserve for themselves an undue level of power and resources, and dehumanize, mistreat, discriminate, and often lynch Africans. We have no friends. To quote Dr. John Henry Clark, Africans don't owe anybody anything except an ass whooping. And I'm not inciting anything. If you have evidence, facts, research, documents, or insights that contradict this, I would love to change this position. I would love to be able to celebrate Algerian independence. I would love to be able to embrace another African nation. And if I'm wrong, then demonstrate it, and I will acknowledge it and move forward with the new evidence. If I'm lying, I'm flying. Let me know. But until, I'm going to tell it like it is, and again, at the risk of alienating people, at the risk of offending folks, because I know I don't understand why it's such a hush-hush thing, because if I say European neocolonialism, black people are like, yeah. When I say, oh, the Chinese are trying to recolonize the continent, yeah. Arab occupation of North Africa, what? Hey, Islam is the black man's religion. You know, arm a leg, arm head. We keep messing around with this Islam stuff, man. We can't tell the truth. We can talk the truth about Christianity. We can't tell the truth about Islam's history in Africa. I'm not anti-Islamic. I'm not Islamophobic. I'm aware of the documented history and the contemporary behaviors of the Islamic nations in and outside of Africa. Do I support the war on terror? Absolutely not. I know that most Muslims are not terrorists. If most Muslims were terrorists, the world would be ablaze. And most quote-unquote actual terrorists, their primary targets and their primary victims are other Muslims. So Christians and even Jews have less to fear from Islamic terrorism than other Muslims. And I know most Muslims aren't even Arabs. The majority of Muslims are Asians. Hell, at this juncture, unfortunately, there might be more black Muslims than Arab Muslims at this point. I have to check those demographics. I'm aware of all that. So I'm not anti-Islamic as to the extent that I'm anti-Judaism, anti-Christian. I'm anti all religions. Except African religions. And I'm not even anti-religious. I'm anti-alien religions. I'm anti-colonial religion. If your culture, if a religion emerged out of your culture and you want to get wrapped up in the mess coming out of your own culture, go for it. That's your right, your sovereign right. But I am anti-Africans worshiping European gods. I'm anti-European worshiping African gods because they still come with that colonial mentality and take it over. But I must say this. We can't shadow over any. If you fight one form of colonization, you must fight all forms. If you're going to denounce one form of oppression, you must denounce all forms of oppression. So I can sit and stand in principled opposition. I stand in principled opposition to European colonization. And I also stand in ongoing opposition to Arab colonization of Africa and discrimination in all forms. I also stand in opposition to neocolonialism of Africa. I also stand in opposition to the African black oligarchs, the African dictators, the African agents of empire, the corrupt African leaders throughout the African continent. I can't just say, well, black oppressors are better. I can't say I don't like white cops and I love black cops. I can't say I oppose Trump and stand and support Obama, who are both international war criminals, who are both imperialists, who are both capitalists. So if we're going to tell it, tell it. If you're going to be against it, against it. You won't find me endorsing any tyrants, but you also won't find me biting my tongue, railing against white imperialism, railing against, white colonization, railing against Christian evangelicals, but I'm supposed to bite my tongue from Islamic racism, Islamic colonizer, Islamic discrimination? Or for that matter, African, what do they call, Yoruba corruption, Hutu corruption. I'm supposed to turn a blind eye to Rwanda and Burundi's working on behalf of the U.S. government via AFRICOM to destabilize the Congo. These are black folks doing dirt. So, I can't celebrate Algerian independence, but I will acknowledge Algerian Independence Day, which was yesterday, July 5th. I will acknowledge Fanon and how Algeria gave us Fanon. I will acknowledge the lessons that the Algerian guerrilla struggle against French occupation has informed other African struggles, armed African rebellions across the globe. I give credit where credit is due, but I also give criticism where criticism is due. We got to liberate our brothers and sisters. We got to decolonize North Africa as aggressively as we fight neo-colonization coming from the West and colonization coming from the East at this point. And it's not just China, also India, Pakistan, the Koreans. Everybody goes. If you want, every emerging capitalist nation understands that the wealth of the Western capitalist nations came out of Africa. So they'd be fools not to pursue that same tactic if they want the same outcome. End Arab occupation of North Africa. End the discrimination of North Africans in Arab-occupied North Africa. And on to something even more important than that. Are you guys familiar with Boonk? Boonk gang, whole lot of gang-ish? I pay attention to this kind of stuff. Not because he did it, but I was thinking this is some type of psyop. Because this guy tapes himself engaging in very obvious crimes. And he even frequently tapes himself, posts on social media. He very frequently posts on social media his arrest warrants. He posts himself on social media engaging in felony assault. He had a minor fender bender, and he jumped out of the car, pointed a weapon at this person, beat their car with a baseball bat, and the guy sped off. And he's been arrested in New York. He's been arrested down in Atlanta several times, but he gets no time. He gets no sentence. So I'm like, this is some type of psyop. And I know black people, we don't really watch white folks watching us. Some of us watch white people. Some of us, we pay attention to what goes on in our own circle. But Dick Gregory would always encourage black people to study white folks. And there's also a school of thought, of consciousness, of militancy that says, well, I don't pay attention. I don't read white people books. I don't pay no attention. I don't vote in America. I don't vote in white folks' elections. I don't blah blah blah. I mean, but you can't get enough of white folks' money. But beyond that, white folks' politics, white folks' scholarship. I don't white schools. Don't come to me with that white education. So I don't just look at black stuff. I don't just look at white stuff. I look at how white people process black stuff and how black people process white stuff. And so we all, if you don't know who Boonk Gang, whole lot of gang-ish, or just go follow the hashtag or ask anybody in your family under 20 years old who's Boonk Gang and Boonk. And a lot of white, racist, right-wing media outlets and websites and blogs follow this guy. And they watch him running around the country acting with literal impunity, being arrested several times but not being sentenced or even fined. And he's literally made millions of dollars going around committing criminal acts on stage and basically being a living embodiment of a black minstrel character, of a black coon, of a Sambo. He's really very much a Sambo. Criminal, listless, thieving, conniving. He's the living embodiment of the white stereotype of the black man. And he gets millions of dollars, and he essentially operates with impunity. So I'm like, this is curious. This is interesting. How does this happen? We know black children are dying while engaging in lawful behaviors. Black people are being accosted, assaulted, and murdered, engaging in lawful behaviors. So how can a celebrity make millions of dollars engaging in videotaped, recorded criminal actions? And the police don't touch him. The criminal justice system don't touch him. Because I believe Boonk Gang is providing a service. Doesn't matter what he means to black people. And I'm not even speaking from a moralist point of view. I just spent an hour railing against religions and religiosity. So I think we should look at this Boonk Gang phenomenon. And he has several imitators from a psyops or psychological warfare point of view. Boonk Gang, in this Boonk Gang phenomenon, is communicating something to both the white community and the black community, communicating to black youth and to white adults. And now he has a sex tape. I'm like, do people even do sex tapes? I mean, is that still a thing? Like, really? It's like sagging pants. Like, some trends you would think would have a shorter lifespan. Like, certain trends, social trends, just won't die. Sagging pants, weaves, and sex tapes. There's certain things are going to be with us in perpetuity. I just can't. I'm not even saying they shouldn't be here. I'm just like, other trends don't stick around. There's on bell bottoms. There's just certain trends don't have the staying power, and I have to try to figure out why. Some trends just will not let unleash us. But anyway, this Boonk Gang, I think, is a psyop. I think that, especially in Middle America, where If you grew up where I grew up, I just took my sons back to my hometown, Kansas City, to reconnect with my relatives. Not reconnect. I mean, we just to keep up with my people. That's how I was raised. You keep up with your people. So I make it a point to go. As though I love my people, but I hate that city. I hate Kansas City, and I never understood this whole Rapid City thing anyway. I've lived in the Bay Area. I've lived in Kansas City, the Midwest. I've lived on the East Coast, New York, many years. I've lived in Chicago for a long ass time. And I have no affinity for any of these places. I don't understand this Rapid City phenomenon. We'll talk about that some other time. But I took my sons home. And my son were born or raised in New York. My first son was born in New York. My baby son, we moved to Chicago when he was an infant, so he grew up in Chicago. So they've lived in metropolis most of their lives. That's all they know. I remember my sister was asking my son, who would be old enough to get his driver's license, "Oh, you're going to get your driver's license?" He's like, "What do I need a driver's license for? I get the Metro, I take the L? What's a driver's license?" And kids from the Midwest, kids from rural and suburban areas, they can't wait to drive. He's like, "What? I just walk out the front door and get on public transit." So they'd never been to the Midwest. And when they went to the Midwest, it was super white. It was super, super, super duper white. And we drive through rural America. We stopped in, I can't even remember where. But my wife, she cooked up and made some vegan deli sandwiches and cooked us up a meal. And so we said, when we get outside of St. Louis, we're going to pull over and have a bite and eat lunch. That'll be about lunchtime, driving from Chicago to Kansas City. And it's just white. And my sons are not really accustomed. They dwell in black spaces, predominantly black communities all their lives. And even as they dwell. And my oldest son is more keen on this. Like, this is very, very, very white place. But I'm getting off point. Anyway, I'm saying. So black people, there are black people, places in America, the Dakotas, parts of Oklahoma, even southern and central Illinois, where the majority of black people that these people interact with come through their video screens. That's their impression of black people. And the white conservative, the neocons, the alt-right have this impression that black people are more successful. If you ask, number one, we're overrepresented. You ask the average white person, what's the percentage of black people in the United States? And they will say, well, America's about 50% black, 60% black. They think that black people are a drain on the system. We collect more public services and welfare than whites, which is not true. They think that black people are more criminal than white people, which is not true. They think that black people are able to operate with more impunity. They watch these TV shows where these detectives, these Dirty Harry type detectives, the Shield type shows, where the cops are so bound by these restrictive regulations and laws that they can't enforce the law. And the only cop that can enforce the law is a cop that's willing to break the law. And every time they arrest some street thug, he gets off on a technicality. So you catch a street thug smoking crack, shooting somebody, and raping a church lady, all at the same time. But when he's arrested, and it's all on video, but when he was arrested, you didn't read him his Miranda rights, so we gotta let him go, because that's how the law works. The law protects criminals. And white people really out here thinking the law, U.S. laws, protects criminals. And so, black people have these delusions about, white people have these delusions about black people. And then you get somebody like Book Gang, who's like, I break the law, I show tapes, and I flaunt the law, and I'm cursing out cops, and I don't work, but yet I make a lot of money. I have no limitations or whatsoever. And this runs out, and white people will walk into the booth this November and click next to the R, vote Republican, vote evangelicals, for this Book Gang stuff. This is a psyop. But we don't understand propaganda. We think entertainment is just entertainment. We think sports is just a game. Our community does not understand propaganda, and we do not understand propagandists. And we do not understand that black media is consumed more aggressively by white people than black people. There would be no NWA multi-platinum artist without white folks. So I do keep an eye on this. I do think back to it. And this boot gang phenomenon, I think there's more to it than meets the eye. And I'm not talking about no reptilian overlords. I'm not talking about no Illuminati. All I'm talking about is straightforward propaganda, reinforcing stereotypes and delusions, promoting antisocial behavior to black youth while reinforcing the delusions of the white majority. It's a very simple thing. And for a couple of $1 million, you can literally get billions of dollars in social capital and political capital and resources. And literally, you think white people are intellectual. You think white senators, state senators, white congressmen, white city council members, you would think that white police chiefs and even white generals who are very educated people, people who have went to West Point, people who have graduated from Harvard and Yale, and you think when they sit down to write laws and when they sit down to write policies, they're looking at research, they're looking at stacks, they're listening to impartial scholarship in order to write laws, in order to enforce policies and enforce laws, in order to determine where they would do investment. And I'm telling you, believe it or not, the people who rule us are stupid. And if Trump don't drive that home for you, I don't know what will. And they will look at a boot gang video and sit down and say, let's write some legislation. We need more aggressive policing. Just go look up, just go and Google, which we're going to talk more about this in detail, the Protect and Serve legislation just passed by Congress, Democrat and Republican, to give not even more protection, to turn police officers into a protected class under federal law. And when a senator is sitting in his chambers, he's looking at boot gang. When these conservative Republican senators, when they're in their chambers and we think they're there studying and diligently studying and developing policies, these conservative Christian right-wing Republicans, after they finish searching and exhaust their gay porn search, they're looking at boot gang videos. You don't believe me? Go back, way back to the early 90s with this Tipper Gore and Al Gore, the vice president and his wife, and they were talking about how hip-hop is causing the downfall of America, how hip-hop and rap music is eroding American values. You know? So I would encourage you, don't go and look for the boot gang sex tape. Unless that's your thing. If you're into that, you do. But after you enjoy the sex tape, I encourage you to look at this from a psyops perspective, from a radical analysis, from a propaganda and policy perspective. Because like I said, black people are being murdered and assaulted by the police and incarcerated while engaged in lawful behavior. So we have a black celebrity who has made millions of dollars. I mean, there was I read yesterday, King, another rapper, paid him $15,000 just to post a link to his video on his Instagram because that's advertisement. Obviously, it's very obviously, I don't know how to make money on this internet nonsense. I barely, I'm not even keeping my show afloat. But Boot Gang got it figured out for some reason. He got it figured out. So pay attention to that. And I also want, how about, it's been almost an hour and a half. How about we talk about the topic? How about we get in to the actual topic of the day? I'm going to go over, and as I usually do, let me do some station ID. This is Q4 Radio, q4.org. You're listening live to the Bro Diallo Show. You can also listen at TuneIn app, iTunes radios, or if you're in the Chicagoland area, you can tune into AM 1680. You can also find this show archived at diallokenyatta.com. And I believe that's it. So please Also, at Q4 is more than just a radio station. It is a movement, it is a community, and you can find out more about the Q4 community and projects and activism at q4.org as well, finding other quality radio programming. So I encourage you to check it out. But moving on, I want to talk about black conservatism. And the reason, what's got me thinking, tripping, jawboning about black conservatism is that it's spreading like a disease. Now, conservatism is relatively hard to define because it's so distorted. But there are several types of conservatism. We have social conservatism, we have economic conservatism, and we have social, economic conservatism, political, and maybe cultural conservatives. And generally, black community, majority of the black community, the majority of black community would be defined as socially conservative but politically liberal. But when I say socially conservative, it is a byproduct of us being indoctrinated into the Christian church. And so black people learned about Jesus through the most godly method of chattel slavery, ungodly. So we learned about Jesus through rape, mutilation, enslavement, murder, and dehumanization. We were enslaved by Christians, and they imposed their beliefs on us. Or as KRS-One put it so lovely, if your slave master wasn't a Christian, you wouldn't be a Christian. And as I said earlier in the discussion this morning, European leaders found out way back under the Emperor Constantine, before the Europeans even embarked on their global empire adventures, when they only had regional empires, that if you can get your subordinates to adhere to some delusional belief system, it's easier to control them than having facts-based or rational subjects or slaves. So let's first deal with social conservatism. Now, the dictionary defines conservatism as a commitment to traditional values and ideas with opposition to change or innovation. The holding of political views that are a free enterprise, that's social conservatism. And then economic conservatism is holding to the political views for favor free enterprise, private ownership, and social conservative ideas, which are actually extremely contradictory. Extremely contradictory. And that's why, and again, people who dwell, and Fred Hampton always said, if you want a revolution, the main thing you have to always do is raise the contradiction. Because by raising the contradiction, it's the only way to awaken the people out of their stupor. To get people to not only question the system, but to see the illegitimacy of the system. By raising the contradiction, identifying and pushing forward the contradictions. Because it makes no sense to be politically liberal and socially conservative. But that's what most black people are. And social conservatism, basically, when we came off the plantation, the United States was still very much a puritanical society. The Pilgrims, remember the myth that we were told, we were brought here, people came here, the Puritans, they were brought here for religious freedoms. And there was these old, remember how the Pilgrims looked at every Thanksgiving in our black schools or white schools? They would have us make those black hats and those black dresses, and which is total myth. That's not how the Pilgrims dressed at all. And they came here looking for religious freedom, which is another myth. They came here seeking money, trying to get paid. Free land? Sign me up. Imagine, we live in the United States right now. Somebody said there's an abundance of resources and free land. How many people would be on the boat? And I know y'all would be like, well, I'm going there for a better life for my family. I'm going there for to be free. I'm going there for liberty. Nah, you're going there to get paid. Right now, if that happened. But you would want the history books. You don't want to go down as the book as the man who died trying to get paid. You want to go down as the man who died for a noble cause. But they did have puritanical beliefs. Judeo-Christian beliefs about man, about woman, and about the environment. Man had dominion over the world. The woman, who was inherently sinful in her form and lived to deceive the man, that the man has to keep tight controls over women, and man has utter dominion of the world. Everything exists for your pleasure and your purpose. The fowl of the air, the animals that roam the land, and the fish that swim the sea are all belong to you. Really sick, psychopathic nonsense, but that is what informed white people when they got here. Dominionism, evangelical, pure. And when they said Puritanism, that doesn't mean being good and being nice. You know, helping the sick and the elderly and being tender to the children. Puritanism means burn out impurities. Kill anybody that doesn't agree with you. And so when a population of religious fanatics says, hey, we're going to get on a boat and go across the ocean, and more likely than not, we're going to die, other Europeans were like, good, because I know we white, but damn, you too white, you too European, get the hell out of here. So when the Puritans came here, starving to death, trying to get paid, chasing that paper, they came with a set of values. And when black people, who for generations, 264, 265 years, were denied access to their culture, denied access to literature, denied access to scholarship, denied access to cultivate our minds, our ideas. When we were emancipated, only thing we could do is just pick up what was laying around. We picked up the clothes laying around, we picked up the food laying around, and we picked up the ideas laying around. And thus was the birth of black conservatism. Black people internalized Judeo-Christian, puritanical ideologies. And we tried to tweak them a little bit. There were certain elements saying that black people are cursed by God. There are many black people, even today, who still believe that, who didn't even remix or try to amend the European views. But that was our identity. And we did that because we thought white people have the money and the power. So if I want money and power, what better way to get it than to imitate the white man? The white man is the head of his household, the king of his castle, that I'll go back to my little sharecropper shack and tell my woman to bow down to me. The white man is a good, noble Christian man. I'm going to be a good, noble Christian man. And we overlook the fact that he was lynching and raping everything he could get his hands on. But hey, like I said, contradiction. Dwelling in a belief is immune to facts. Faith makes you immune to facts and evidence. You could see something right before your eyes. Now, any rational people would have came off the plantation and said, not only am I abandoning, because I've always said, the only thing more tragic than accepting the religion of your enslaver is accepting the economic system of your enslaver. But a lot of it wasn't about our choice, even though we were quote-unquote free, quote-unquote emancipated. Excuse me. We know the deal. It wasn't what it was. But anyway, there are black people to this day, in 2018, after having access to all this scholarship, after having the opportunity to travel back to the African continent, reconnect with our ancestors, study African philosophy, study African culture, study African mores and ideologies, post-colonial, granted, a lot of it's contaminated by colonialism, but it's still some elements there. After having all these great African scholars, and even African American scholars, everybody from Chinwezu to John G. Jackson, Arthur Schomburg, I mean, I ain't got to run down the list. We know these people. We still, at our core, hold on to what our great-grands and our great-grandpappies, what they taught us about these core puritanical Christian values. We have yet to have our own African Reformation. And I think we need an African Reformation where everything we think we believe, everything we accept, we turn a critical eye to. and we have our own purges, our own black inquisition. We got to have our own internal struggle to really determine, are these our values? Or is there some possession? Amos Wilson talked about extensively and wrote about what he called somnambulistic possession. Somnambulism basically means sleepwalking. Ambulism means ambulatory walk. So you're basically awake and functioning, but not fully awake. You're physically functioning, but mentally, intellectually, you're not awake. And he said that black people, on a secular level, are possessed by a demon. But the demon is not a creature from another realm, a creature from Hades, a supernatural creature. He said we're possessed with alien ideologies, alien perceptions, where we as African are trying to relate and engage the world as white people, as Asians. And we see it. Remember, we watched A Different World? And Dwayne Wayne was this brilliant black man, and the best he could figure to do with his brilliant black brain was to get a job at Konichiwa Electronics. And now he's like, white folks said, okay, now it's the information age. Fine, if white men say it, then it must be so. And we need STEM. And we go, and all the time. And when the white man said, this is the industrial revolution, okay, it's industry time. Let's run into the factories. It's the information age. Okay, it's coding time. Let's teach black kids to code. It's the agricultural revolution. Okay, black man, return to the land. Every type of major economic, political, social movement, black people always playing catch up. And then we fight white folks to let us in. And the moment they let us in is the moment the industry is collapsing. Or as Claude Anderson said, racism holds us in place while technology steamrolls over us. So the moment we get into the agricultural revolution, they went from small-scale agriculture to major industrial agriculture, and we were burnt. Then they talk about the Industrial Revolution. We all packed up and got ran out of the Deep South and came to the warmth of other suns and came up north. All came like, oh, you can find. You throw a rock anywhere in South Chicago, you're going to hit somebody that's a descendant of Mississippians. My wife, born and raised in Chicago, her people come out of Mississippi. They still got connections, family, land, Macomb, Mississippi. We all ran up here to run to it. And my father's, my wife's paternal grandfather, he was a civil rights icon, Mingo. He was, whenever Dr. King came to town, he was Mingo, his bodyguard. He was a big labor man, a big husky hulk of a man who was both a freedom fighter and an industrialist. But the moment we got a foothold in the union movement, the moment we got a foothold in industrial America, oh, it's on to the information. It's outsourcing and the information age. And I tell y'all, the moment we get a real foothold in the information, the internet age, it's going to be the post-carbon economy. And then we're going to be marching and protesting, we need post-carbon jobs. We keep playing this game instead of saying, listen, let white folks go and do and have their economic cycles and their economic trends. Let's start our own cycles and have our own damn trends. And if white folks go that way, we find our own damn way. And if our way happens to be parallel with them, fine. But at least say this is something we came up with and let them play catch up with us. And we already know if we do come up with a good idea, they're going to bomb it, they're going to shoot it, they're going to discredit it, they're going to attack it. So we already know anything we construct has to have extreme, most aggressive, well-entrenched defense mechanism, ideological, material, and even military defense from white attack. And white people, don't get mad at me for saying this, stop the damn attacking. I mean, white people get more offended of being accused of atrocities than they do are offended by the committing of atrocities. I never understood that with the good white folks. You good white people. Don't call, I don't like those terms. And again, I'm a rationalist. I pride myself. I like other people run around wearing crosses on their neck and are proud to show you this little light of theirs and they're going to let it shine. That's how I am about my rationality. This little rationality, this little darkness of mine, I'm going to let it descend. Let it descend, let it descend. I don't know. What's the opposite of shining your light? Descending your darkness. So show me evidence to the counter. So black people, by default, we're conservatives. because black people are very insecure in this society. And I don't talking about emotional insecurity. I'm talking about economic insecurity. I'm talking about political insecurity. I'm talking about bodily integrity insecure. We have been under attack. Our skin tone, our skin color, our hair texture, our facial features, our ancestor, our lineage, our very reality is under perpetual attack. And one thing that drives conservatism is fear. And I tell you, black people are extremely conservative. We are the most conservative people around. When the communists came here and white people started flirting with communism and anarchism and all these existentialism, all these weird ideas. Oh, Lord, I don't want no parts of that. And if your cousin or if your auntie or if your nephew or even son said, I'm a communist, black people would be the first before white folks. What? That's crazy. That's crazy talk. Black people in alien religions, we want the mainstream, mainly Christianity. All that new age stuff, oh Lord, no, we don't mess around now. And this is the reality. I understand it. I don't even condemn it, but we have to articulate it if we're going to correct it. But black people is like, I'm barely holding it together where I am. I ain't got time to mess around with other stuff. You know, and we even joke, our comedians talk all the time about white people doing skydiving, bungee jumping, jumping in cages and dipping the cages in, swimming with the great white sharks, climbing Mount Everest. They be like, black reality is enough of an adventure. I ain't gonna get on no motocross bike and jump off a 100-foot ramp because I'm black in America. Want to talk about a thrill? Want to talk about an adventure? Want to talk about an adrenaline rush? I get that just trying to get to my mailbox and back without being shot by a black criminal or a white cop. So that kind of fear, that kind of insecurity drives conservatism. I know stuff is bad, but I know it could get worse. So I'm not even going to strive for better because I'm just going to try to stay right here. Keep it safe, keep your head down. Don't rouse. You don't want to end up like Emmett Till. Even when Emmett Till went down south, Emmett Till was told, keep your head down, be cool. Don't stir nothing up. So black conservatism, a lot of black conservatives like to pretend like, well, our conservatism is based in values of morality and well-being. No, black conservatism is based in fear. Claude Anderson asked the question 30, 40 years ago, what does a black conservative have to conserve? What in America do we have to conserve? What traditions, what values do we have to conserve? So black conservatism is driven by fear, and it's also encouraged by the larger system. And we often engage in these behaviors thinking that we're acting like white people. We're acting like real Americans. But real Americans, you read James Howard Kunstler's, or you read any of these white social scientists. White people are lying to themselves and lying to us about their reality. Their sculpted lawns, their quaint suburban lives, how moral and hard, how we got everything we have from hard work and the American dream and the middle class values. It's all a lie that black people are trying to live up to this falsehood that white people have erected. And no matter how many times white people demonstrate to us that they're full of it, no matter how many Trumps or George H.W. Bush or how many other incompetent white men they elect to power, we still don't call them on it. You don't value hard work. You don't value sexual conservatism. Every time the Republican Party has their convention, it's like a windfall for white prostitutes, white male prostitutes. There's literally a caravan of white male prostitutes that follow Republican conventions and Republican conferences all over the country because that's where the money is. How many more conservative white evangelical Christians do they got to find booed up with some young white boy before we realize white conservatism is a myth, like white Christianity? And we hold more to white stuff than they do, to our own detriment. So black people embracing conservatism comes from our history of enslavement, our long history of insecurity, our academic, ideological isolation from Africa and from everywhere else in the world. And when new ideas, new outlooks enter the society, black people are very slow to get on the board. And by the time we get on board, it's already old. The money has been made and distributed. We always playing perpetual catch up. And now, with Trump in office, well, I'll come to that. But with Trump in office, I'm seeing that black conservatism, even though it's not often called that, black people are praising Trump's crackdown on immigrants. Black people are praising Trump America First policies because black people have been suffering economically. Black people were neglected by Obama, and since we have this stupid notion that, oh, well, you know, we go from one side of the pendulum. A lot of black people that were in the street crying tears and snobbling and blowing snot bubbles behind Obama and his beautiful black family ascending to the White House now are praising Trump's ultra-conservative, Nazi, fascist policies. Because we think the Mexicans are taking our jobs, sounding like some redneck. As if we had jobs before Mexicans were immigrating here. As if we had economic security at any time. The Irish immigrants took our jobs. The Italian immigrants took our jobs. Anybody that come here is going to, the Indians, coming all the way from India, take our jobs. Anybody that comes here is going to take our jobs because they're not our jobs. They're not our jobs. Nobody can take something from you. That's like me going downtown and seeing a white person purchase the Chicago, what's that, Sears Tower. I don't know the new name of it. I don't remember the Ebbets Tower. I don't know. And I'm like, they just took my skyscraper. I had nothing to do with that deal. I wasn't considered in that deal. And if they didn't sell it to the immigrant, they would have sold it to another white citizen. I had nothing to do with that. What makes us think those jobs are ours to be taken from us? Do you really think if every Mexican was purged from the country, white people would be knocking on black folks' jobs and say, hey, I got a job for you and allow you to work it with dignity and give you a living wage? When has that ever been the case? Long before the Mexican economy. And if you go back to Ross Perot, who stood in opposition to NAFTA, and he said, if NAFTA is passed, we're going to export our surplus to Mexico, and Mexico is going to export its peasants to America. He said NAFTA is going to allow the United States to flood Mexico with surplus goods, subsidized corn and grain, where it will be more sensible for the average Mexican citizen to buy U.S. subsidized corn than to buy Mexican-grown corn, which means that Mexican farmers, Mexican laborers, Mexican proletariats will not be able to live in Mexico anymore and make a living. And when people can't make a living somewhere, what do? They pick up and go somewhere else. And if that somewhere else means they got to cross a border, then so be it. Black people picked up and went from the south to the north for the same reason, to escape harm and to seek opportunity. And if that opportunity wasn't found in the industrial cities of the north, then we would have headed on and kept going to Canada. It is what it is. And that's why, for the same reason, now that the U.S. industry is eroded, many blacks are moving back down south. Fortunately for black citizens, the United States economy is vast enough and dynamic enough where we don't have to cross the border. We don't have to run to Mexico or Canada. We can just go from state to state. But I guarantee you, if states started erecting the same restrictive migration, saying you can't go from Kansas to Missouri without papers and this and that, black people would be sneaking from Missouri to Kansas. And the moment that the United States economy fully implodes, believe you me, black people will be running to Mexico and Canada. That's just what it ain't got nothing to do with your love for your nation or your hatred of your nation. It's just a historical phenomenon. People move when they gotta move, do what they gotta do. And in fact, even creatures, migratory creatures, if there's a drought in the area, the predators will follow. First animals to move are the herbivores, the herd animals. There's no grain here, we're gonna walk. And so what do the predators do? The lion, the cheetah, the leopard, the falcon, oh, my food source is moving, so I'm gonna follow my food source. Animals are not dumb enough to try to divide the world up in artificial borders. But anyway, black people think, well, kick out the Mexicans. Because hurt people hurt people. We're suffering. So the only thing to make my suffering, if I can't end my suffering, the one thing I can do is enhance the suffering of someone else, therefore making my suffering more palatable. My suffering don't look so bad. Yeah, we suffering in the ghetto, homicide, eroded school systems. We're suffering in the ghetto to no end. But at least we ain't no Honduran immigrant. But one thing you also have to know in history. Many Germans sat there and watched the Jews marched off the death camps. And within 3 years, they had bombs raining down on their head. Every major city and population center in Germany was bombed. So you might have been spared the concentration camp only to have a bomb dropped on your head. Injustice. And Martin Luther King wasn't joking when he said an act of injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. You never find white people sit back and watch the America wage a war on the black community under the auspices of a war on drugs, and now they got their opiate crisis. And the same CIA network that put crack in the hood is the same corrupt network that put opium in the streets. They brought crack to the black community from Colombia. They bring in opium from Afghanistan into white communities. And all the prisons and all the mandatory minimums, all those laws there. And now the white kids, the whole foster care system, they then sat there and watched black kids being snatched out of their homes. And now white kids are the white children are flooding the foster care infrastructure that was set up to break up black families because white parents are ODing every which way. And white folks in the 80s were voting Republican in record numbers because they were get tough on crime. Drugs, fight the drug war. And now that same trap that they said they fell into. It always happens. So if black people are embracing conservative ideas about keeping America, protecting America's borders, let me tell you something. Border protection is about military and organized invasion. America does not have weak borders. It's not about individuals crossing the refugees, keeping out refugees, legitimate refugees. Hondurans are legitimate refugees of U.S. foreign policy. But that's another discussion. There are a lot of Trump policies that are very attractive to black people because black people have been indoctrinated into conservative values. Trump is anti-abortion, and the black community is anti-abortion. Trump is anti-immigrant, and the black community, as we suffer and decline more economically, we lash out at people who had nothing to do with our economic decline. So there are a lot of black conservatives or black people who don't even understand that they're conservative, who embrace Trump as a Christian. Remember 2 Corinthians, he said, nobody loves the Bible more than me. I'm more Christian. Black people love to hear politicians talk about their Christian credentials. So there's a lot about Trump that is very, and then you look at the stock market, and the stock market is just, it's quite volatile, but the trend is up. So the stock market's doing good, and black people especially, but white people too. I don't understand why you can't understand that the stock market don't mean a damn thing to the average citizen. Noam Chomsky said, under capitalist economies, the health of the economy has no direct correlation with the health of the population or the health of the society. So black people are becoming more politically conservative, socially conservative, economically conservative, and culturally conservative. We have a lot of militant conservatism, from Farrakhan to Umar, men who hold on to traditional puritanical Judeo-Christian. I don't care, they say they militant Pan-Africanism. When you look at the core of their ideas, the core of their views on the family, on women, the role of women, and economics, work hard, bootstrap nonsense, dupe ourselves. When you look at their fundamental ideology, it's Judeo-Christian, conservative, even Republican ideas. But they say, I'm a black militant, or I'm a black Pan-Africanist, but you're a conservative. You support the status quo. You just want to have a higher standing within the status quo. So the status quo is a box, and you're trying to reposition yourself within that box. And repositioning yourself within a box is not liberating yourself from the box. We're supposed to break open the box. So I'm noticing that people who maybe would never vote for Trump are supporting Trump. I'm seeing more black people articulate conservative values and conservative ideas. And conservatism has never, in the long term, served black people collectively. There are some individuals, such as Colin Powell, Clarence Thomas, Condoleezza Rice, Minister Louis Farrakhan, Dr. Umar Johnson, all the black ministers, all the Judeo-Christian black ministers, many prominent black imams and Islamists. Yes, individuals, conservatism works because conservatism is about maintaining the status quo. So if you're in the box, but you got a better position in the box than the masses of your people, then you should be conservative. And also, people like 50 Cent, who are Shaquille O'Neal, or Snoop Dogg, and are very conservative, political and economic conservative. They believe in free market capitalism. Many wealthy backs. Bob Johnson, Oprah Winfrey. Some of them are social liberals, but they're economic and political conservative. And many of them not only vote for Republican policies and vote for Republican politicians, they endorse them, even publicly. Remember when 50 Cent came out and endorsed George W. Bush in his second term. And he even got a lot of young black people to vote for George Bush because he said, George Bush is like me. George Bush is gangster. And this is at a time where Get Rich or Die Trying was all over the charts. Wanksta. And so he gave an open endorsement of a racist, genocidal administration. And this is nothing new, but it seems to be something we're understanding less and less. Social conservatism is not black. It's not ours. In fact, it is extremely detrimental. There should not be a black conservatism or black conservatives because there's nothing in this nation, in this culture, in this economy that we should seek to conserve. But political conservatism is very attractive to black people because it's for the same reason it's attractive to white. It absolves you of any responsibility and it displaces the blame. Oh, it's the immigrants are the problem. It's lazy people who are the problem. It's all these sick people who want free health care who are the problem. Conservatism never defines the elites or the fundamental structure as the problem because that is what you're trying to conserve. That is the very root. So I think that as a black community, as a conscious community, we need to identify the growth, the expansion of black conservatism and fight it tooth and nail. Fight it unapologetically, fight it aggressively. And what are the alternatives to progressivism? I'm not advocating liberalism. I'm not advocating liberalism, even though political liberalism is also just as detrimental. Social liberalism, I am more sensitive to. I'm more understanding of. But political liberalism, economic liberalism, I also I stand in opposition. What we need is radicalism. Don't be a black conservative, don't be a black liberal, be a black radical. Radicalism means that you examine this society. Social conservatism means that you want to preserve the system. Radicalism means you're going to look at the system at its core. You're not going to accept anything at face value. You're not going to accept anything as a given. Everything is up for examination and transformation. So as a radical, there are elements of the society you're saying, hey, we can preserve this. We can even enhance this. But as a radical, you will also say certain things are absolutely illegitimate. I stand in opposition. I will deconstruct. I will destroy. I will rebuild in a different way and a whole different set of values. Black people have been conservative for a long time. Our conservatism is driven by fear, insecurity, and white indoctrination. All three things we need to overcome. As Gil Scott-Heron said, don't be afraid of revolution. Ain't nothing but change, and change is sure enough bound to come. And our conservatism is what allows us to remain in perpetual oppression over so many decades, over so many generations. The only time we've made real progress is when we've embraced, or enough of us have embraced, radicalism. And I'm seeing a lot, so much, unrelenting conservatism emerge in the black community in endorsement of Trump, and is driven by this insecurity that Trump is creating. Black people are being more conservative about, oh, Trump is going to end abortion. Trump is going to stop the immigrants. Trump is going to free and free up the economy. It's going to be free market. He's going to deregulate the economy. And black people really think that's going to bode well for us when we've been through this before. We've been under puritanical rule before. We lived under a Roe v. Wade in '73, under where abortion was illegal, the economy was unregulated. The gays, the gays were all forced into the closet. You know, where Christian values ruled the day, where children knew their place and you could beat children with impunity, and your wife, she knew she better stay in her place and keep her mouth shut and be beautiful and unheard. We lived in that world already, and do you remember those days? The long, long time ago's days, the 1950s, 40s, 30s, 20s, 1890s, 1860s, 1840s. We've been there. Black people, conservative, makes no sense because we lived under conservative America. And thank goodness for black radicals, Black Panther Party, and even in their own era, in their own historical context, Martin Luther King was very radical. That's why Martin Luther King was not popular amongst the conservatives. The conservatives didn't support King. King had to hook up with Stokely Carmichael and H. Rap Brown, SCLC. He might be conservative by today's standards, but King even had it, and King was evolving. We never got nothing out of radicalism. But when our freedom fighters and radicals would stand up and fight, they'd get shot down, they'd be sent into exile, they'd be incarcerated, we get scared, and then we go back, oh, well, you can't be talking that black stuff. You just need to get ahead. You just need to get a good job. You just need to get a good school. Don't be talking all that black stuff. And we run back to conservatism because it keeps us warm and safe, but it's a trap. It's a lie. Black people, I know, I respect, and I celebrate how many black people were aware of Hillary's history of international war crime, Hillary's racism, and that black people, enough of us, rejected the Clintons to prevent her from getting into the White House. I so commend black peoples who stood in principled opposition to Hillary Clinton, her campaign, and her ascension to the presidency. I so admire, and I'm so proud of us. But that just opposition to Hillary Clinton does not mean an endorsement of Trump. You can be against cancer and diabetes at the same time. Even though, you know, your enemy's enemy is not automatically your friend. And I don't see this developing. I see a lot of black people are opposition to Trump based on their adherence to the Democratic Party, to liberalism. I'm not talking about liberal opposition to Trump, because liberal opposition to Trump is just they don't like Trump's style. Because Obama did a lot of the same stuff as Trump did. But so it's about a style over substance. But the black people, the conscious black people, who stand in principled opposition, not in superficial or cosmetic opposition, but in ideological opposition to Hillary Clinton, I don't see that coming strong enough against Trump. And I see too much praise or tacit endorsements of Trump. I see too much conservatism reasserting itself in the black community. And it's going to be even more so because Trump is about to create unnecessary strife, economic and international conflicts. So that's going to feed into more conservatism. Just like abused children clinging to the leg of their abusive parents. We got to fix that. This is Bro Diallo Show. I want to share some music. I also got a presentation, some more insights on Trump, It's Worse Than You Think, by two of my favorite investigative journalists. You know, one of them is Greg Palast, and I saw Greg Palast, and I wanted to speak to him. It was at the Green Festival a couple of years ago. I wish I went up and said hello, but I didn't want to come off like no groupie. Investigative journalism groupie. That's such a sad position. But anyway, thanks for listening. This is the Bro Diallo Show. I'll be back. I'm going to be on the air till 10 a.m., so stay tuned. I got a lot of good material for you. Also, we're organizing Nubians for Literacy National Book Club. So there's going to be more information on that. African World Order, African World Coalition, ecology. There's so much going on. I don't even know when to say what. I'm exhausted, but I need support just to maintain the Bro Diallo Show. Please go to Patreon. Please, I'm on YouTube now. So please go to my YouTube page, YouTube/Diallo Kenyatta, or search Diallo Kenyatta. You can find videos, archives. You can go to also on diallokenyatta.com. Also, you can make a contribution at diallokenyatta.com to sustain us on the air, or you can become an ongoing sustainer through Patreon, which we really need it. But because I don't want to go off the air, I think this is an asset for our people in our community, the Bro Diallo Show. If not a popular asset, a necessary asset, an underutilized asset. But what can we do about that? We're going to keep strong. We're going to keep going long, keep going strong. And for the time that we're here, I appreciate this opportunity. I do not take it for granted. And an opportunity to speak to my community, to speak to the world. I don't take it for granted, so I do take time to put substantive content out from my own mouth and from what I share via my research, my audio, video archives, and all of that. So shout out to my listeners. Shout out to the revolutionary Algerians and the Algerian Revolution, and liberate North Africa, liberate all of Africa, fight historical colonialism and neo-colonialism. Bro Diallo Show, Q4 Radio. This is the cool Fat Cat, Bigger Fish, and I'll be here. I'll be with you on the other side.
Well, what have we here?
We're going off live, but we're going to be on the air. So if you're watching live, you can continue to follow the Bro Diallo Show, Q4 Radio, q4.org, or you can find the show archived at diallokenyatta.com. And I'll be with y'all next Friday morning on live.